Welcome to the Neo introductional video for software version 3.8. There are hundreds of enhancements, bug fixes, and many new features in this version of Neo software. So dive in and learn what's new with Neo. Alright, so we're going to go into basic mode to get us started. One of the areas of biggest change is the way that Neo console deals with loading and saving shows. Now, under the current version, the file is automatically saved all the time. So every change that you make, it gets stored to the hard drive. Well, this has changed to align itself a little more with the way more common programs work. So the show will always be safe, and changes will always be stored into active memory, so in the memory of the disk. Only when you actually press save will it actually save to the hard drive. So when you start a new show, if there's a show file in the active memory, it's been changed, there will be a prompt to save it. If the show file has not changed, then the new show file will be started immediately. If you are loading an existing show, a prompt will appear to save the existing show file before the selected show is loaded. You can choose to save or not. And when a prior show is opened, which was a FDB file, it will convert it to the new format, which is a .neo show file. And the show file can now be loaded directly from an external drive or a USB key without any prior need to copy it over to the console's hard drive. Now, when saving a show, if changes to the show file have been made, an archive copy is created at the moment that the saving occurs. It's safely stored away, allowing a restoration back to that version at any time. The show remains in active memory regardless, allowing continued work on the file. If you save as, this is identical to saving a show that it's under a different name. This is especially useful for keeping multiple copies of the show file to be able to go back to in earlier versions. So it's basically going to work a little more the way the majority of Windows programs work. You load it up, it's in active memory, you work on it. If you reboot the console, if there's a problem, the console restarts, everything will be saved, everything will be fine. It's just not stored to the hard drive until you actually press save. So this is more flexible. It gives you more ability to load from other devices, and is one of the big improvements that Neo has made in version 3.8. So here's the main interface. The large area with all the numbers is your classic channel grid. This will show you all of the patched channels that you have in patch. Above that, you have icons or buttons for commands. They're grouped with like kind. Some of them will have a pull down window on the right to give you more specific option within that category. So the grouping on the left is all about selection. The next group is about levels. The third group has park, undo, and release. The fourth group is about recording and updating items. The fifth group is about effects, libraries, channel groups, and palettes. And then you have view and copy. The sidebar on the left can be expanded or contracted for your needs. I generally recommend having it allow the classic grid to be 20 channels wide. You have two tabs, one for fixture control and one for current playback. The yellow information is there to pop out as important information to show you your defaults. So we're set to record live, which is standard theatrical mode, allowing the console to store everything that's going out the desk. Essentially what you see is what you get, with a couple of exceptions that we'll talk about in a moment. To the right of that tells you the mode that you're in for recording. So currently we're in tracking mode, and marking on the desk is set to mark as late as possible. Those exceptions are for effects, subs, and palettes. So if the information over here is yellow, then it will include those items when you record. If the information is red, it will not include that information when you record. So currently, If you have effects that are running, they will record. If you have values coming from submasters, they will be ignored. And if you have moving light information referencing palettes, the queue will store the palettes, not raw data. And these can be turned on or off just by clicking on them to change their color. Here's where your list of queue is, some on-screen buttons for activating your queue list, name of the show file, date, time. This area down here is your attribute window. Currently it's blank because we do not have any attributed fixtures patched. You have your command line area, so that as I type information, that will appear in the command line. To the right of that, you have your master fade time indicator, shortcut page indicator button to open up the shortcut window, submaster page indicator button to open up a virtual submaster window, and your playback page indicator. Below that are a list of buttons for displays or options. Your options pull down will show you where you can create and open shows, save, import, backup. You can also access system properties and some external triggers, scheduling events and things. This is also where you can access manuals and documentation. About Neo, so you can see what version of code you have, and restart and shut down. Many of these will be display windows that you'll go into. For example, if I click on the queue list, it will open up a floating window for that. However, if I go into blind, it will just take the live display and turn it into a blind display. More is also a pull down window where everything else is going to be either a full screen or a floating display. Now let's go into system properties and take a look at the content of basic mode. So all of the normal options have been simplified down, and you're limited to only seeing a handful of options. So DMX output options will show you the quantity of universes that the system is authorized for. Phillips Advantage is turned on. If you're communicating over network, you get to pick your protocol within this list. Console ports are the DMX ports on the back of the console and can be configured to whatever universes you want them to. System settings, you have an on button on the console. This will determine the level that the on button uses. You have up and down buttons on the console that are relative level buttons. This determines the relative value that they will change. Your grandmasters have buttons that can be assigned to do different functionality. And your AB faders for your primary queue list are currently disabled, but they have several options for you. And show command line syntax help will appear. Setting up your backup is very important to make sure that your show file data is safe. So here you've got two backup locations. One is set by default into the show backup folder. The second backup location should be configured to go to an external drive or a USB key. To the right, you have information that shows you the interval that the backup will occur, as well as the number of backups that the console will keep as you're programming, and it records backups for you. Show defaults. You have queue list defaults for queue time and downtime. Your default tracking record mode. Your options are queue only tracking, or a new method called queue only for intensities and tracking for attributes. So it's a combination of the two. Could be very useful for people that are very comfortable in the queue only world, yet they're now working with attributed fixtures. Set automark allows the lights to prepare all the parameters before they are needed. That can either be turned off. You can have it mark as early as possible or mark as late as possible. You can also determine if it marks in queue time or if it just takes the default time to mark. And here are the check boxes for same as the effects sub and palettes command there in the sidebar to allow you to include or exclude them by default when you record. And of course the ability to play this video at any time. There's also a large switch here where you can switch from basic to advanced mode if you need to. But again, we're talking about basic mode, so this is where we will start. So it's simple to get started with Neo. I'm just going to do options, new show. What it's going to do is create a new unnamed show, and it'll say unnamed show. A little asterisk will appear at the end of this if something has changed and it has not been saved yet. So you can now begin work. So everything you do will be saved in active memory, and it will save to the hard drive when you go to options and you say save as. The save button isn't available because I haven't created a show file. But we're just going to call this Neo Training, and I already have it, so I'm just going to override, and there we are. So this is called Neo Training, and we can get started. So I'm going to release all these channels that I have selected by hitting the release key, and we're going to go into patch and take a look at patching conventional channels first. So if you look on the left, you have your area for fixtures. On the right, your area for outputs, available fixtures from the libraries, bottom right. And down toward the bottom, you've got your fixture make and model box for the type that you're patching and your patch command line. So we've started with a one-to-one patch for the capacity of this system, which is by default set at 1,000 channels. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is actually get rid of some patching or starting over. So I could do one at enter, and you'll see if you look up top left, that's removed any patch from channel 1. Well, I essentially want to do that for the whole system, so I'm going to say 1 through 1000 at enter, because you can do that for a range, and at enter is a pretty common strand console command to get rid of an instruction. So what I want to do is just do some basic patching. If I'm doing, channel 1 at dimmer 12, then I can just do 1 at 12 enter, and that will patch that up. I'm going to clear that out, 1 at enter, and in this particular case I want to patch 1 to 1 for 100 channels. So I'll say 1 through 100 at 1. Now the other thing that I'm going to do is put in some valuable information based upon the position and the purpose and the color of my system. So I'm going to do 1 enter, which will page me back up to channel 1, and I'm going to come over here to the position column, and fixtures 1 through 9 are front lights, warm front light from the cove position. So I'm going to say COVE and then hold the shift and the arrow key down to copy this information from channels 1 through 9. And now I'm going to go to purpose, and I'm going to say warm fronts, or an abbreviation of such, and I'm actually going to increase the size of my fixture side and minimize the side of my output side to give me a little more room here. So I'm now going to go to color, and I'm going to type in the gel color that these lights have, and say it's Roscoe 305, and I'll just shift enter to copy that down, and I'm going to start with channel 11, and these are also 9 lights in the cove, and these are my cool fronts, and I'll copy that down, and we'll say these are Roscoe 65. I'll now come to 21, and we're going to say this is my first electric for 9 areas, and we're going to call these their side lights or pipe ends. So I'll copy that down, and these have lead 201, and I'll do one more set. We'll do second electric, then third electric, and then fourth electric for the last 3, and all of these are going to be blue backs, and we'll say this is our 68. So now that I have some useful information as well as patching, some basic patching complete, what I'm going to do is go back to my live display, and it will ask if I want to save that, and I'll say yes. And now we see that we have this useful information that appears in our channel grid. So channel 1, it's on the cove position, it's a warm front, and it's got Roscoe 305. The beauty of this is you not only have useful information to visually be able to see and understand what's going on, is we have things called selection shortcuts. So if I hit the select button on the console right above your command tile on the left, you'll see this opens up and will show you um, pre-built selection shortcuts based upon the position, the purpose, and the color information that's been inputted within patch. So if I wanted to grab all of my Roscoe 305 units, I can just click on that, grab them, and we'll say we want those at 60%. And if I go back to my selection window and I grab my R65 units, then I can put those at 30%. So let's talk for a moment about controlling dimmers, right? We've got all these channels patched and we've controlled that. But what if you need to, what if you don't know the channel number? You need to address a dimmer. You need to find the light because you're not sure what it's plugged into. So I can always say dimmer 53 full. Now what that's done is put dimmer 53 at full regardless of the channel that it's patched to. I can see a little flag bottom right that says dimmers unpatched. If I go in my DMX view, I can see that dimmer 53 is given a hard level at 255. And the beauty of this is now if I'm poking around and trying to find the light, I can next or last until I find what I'm looking for. So when you are done, and it's important to understand that this dimmer will stay unpatched until you tell it to go back to normal operation. And when you have a dimmer selected like this and given a hard level, it will no longer respond to its channel control. So therefore, it's effectively unpatched. So if you just hit the dimmer key twice, that'll just put everybody back. We can look at the DMX view and see that's all back where it's supposed to be. Now let's talk about patching LEDs. So we're going to go back in the patch, and here we've got 1 through 100 as conventional channels, so I'm just going to say 101 enter to sort of page us down. And we're going to patch up some Philips Silicon PL products. So here in the generic folder in the available fixtures, you can see all sorts of generic fixtures, RGB, RGBA, RGBAW, RGBW. That's all available. We're going to go down to the Philips Silicon brand. We'll open up the box to see everything that's here, and we can see, and we're going to patch up some PL Profile 1s, Mark IIs, the second generation, and if I click on that we can see all the different modes. So there's 15 channel mode, a 9 channel mode, and a 5 channel mode. We're going to select 15 channel mode, and when we select it here, it will automatically populate our fixture make model box for command line patching, which is great. So what we want to do is patch up 10 of these starting at channel 101, and we're going to start their addressing in the second universe. So I'm going to say 101 through 110 at 2.1. Now I could have used 513, but I find it a little more intuitive to use the universe dot and the address. So now I'm going to hit enter, and it's going to ask if we want to auto create palettes for these fixtures, and that's a fine idea, so I'll just hit enter to do yes. And we can see we've got our 10 LEDs patched. Here are the addressing, here's the type, and if I go to my DMX output side and go to my tab for my DMX2 second universe, we'll see all the parameters that are here in all of the patching. So now I'm going to hit my live key on the screen. It's going to ask if I want to save. I'm going to say yes. And now we can talk about basic channel control. So I could always type 1 through 9 at 3, enter, or at 30, 11 through 19 at 5, 0, enter, or at 5, enter. So pretty basic command line functionality on channel control. Let's take a quick look now at controlling channels on the LEDs. So I'm going to grab all the LEDs by doing 101 through enter. Now 101 through enter will grab 101 and go through the range, but you're not telling it where to stop. So where's it stopping? It's going to go all the way to the end of your patched channels, or if you have a gap in channel numbers, it will stop at the gap, or if you change fixture type. So with these selected, I'll just say at 5 enter to go to 50%. Now let's talk about LED control. On your 4 encoders, you'll have red, green, blue, and white, and you can just roll and manipulate those accordingly. You can also hold down the plus or the minus key, twiddle an encoder, and that will go to the maximum value or the minimum value. In addition to that, you do have graphical control on screen. In the fixture control tab, you've got 3 different tabs here for intensity, color, and utility. We'll stop at color for a moment. There's a preset color pull down with preset colors that are calibrated for all the fixtures. Otherwise, what you have is you have slider control. You also have color picker control. Notice it's controlling all 4 uh, color engines. You could turn off, use it, apply to all color faders, and now it will only use RGB. So you have a choice here. You can also open up the generic color chooser, and now you have an app which will allow you to choose different methods of control. HSI for hue, saturation, intensity, RGB, CMY, filters, spectrum. I'm going to go back to, in the CIE gel chart, I'm going to go back to HSI for a minute. You can pick off the color picker or go to your encoders, and I'm manipulating the hue parameter. There's the saturation parameter, and there's the intensity parameters. So all of these are available for you to manipulate color. And now we'll jump right into recording cues. So recording cues is pretty basic. You can say record cue 1, enter. That will record cue 1. It puts us in the queue. We know that by looking in the sidebar, and the queue that we've just recorded, Q1, has a yellow border around it. That means we're soaking in the queue or assert in the queue. On the channel grid, it has released those channels for us so that we know that whatever's controlling anything is going to be the queue that we're in. So I'm going to make some changes. So I'm just going to grab 1 through 9 and say up, up, so it'll go up 10%. And now I'm just going to say record to enter. So I'm not typing the word Q, and that's recorded Q2. We have blue for levels going up. We have purple on 11 through 19 for levels that have stayed where they are, so they've essentially tracked from the previous Q. And I'm going to say select previous. That'll grab 1 through 9 again, and we're going to take those out. Actually, out is what I meant to do. And now we're going to just do record enter, which will record the next whole queue number at the end of the queue list. So from 2, that's recorded 3. And we now have a new color, green. That's for levels that are going down. If I grab 51 and 53 and 55 and put them at 6 and just hit record twice, that's actually the fastest way to record. And again, it would just auto increment for you. Let's take a quick look at recording color palettes. So I have my LEDs on the color. I'm going to press the record key. I'm going to demonstrate if this were on a single monitor system. I'd go to channel groups, go to my color tab, and then just click on the one that I want, in this case 1, and I'll give it a label, call it cyan. and now I've got one labeled cyan. Now if I mix another color, just pull all the green out, and I say record, and I go back up here to channel groups and plus 2, we'll call this lavender, and now I've got those. If I happen to be on the multi-monitor system, most likely what I would do is open up the color palette window, have this on my second monitor, and then just record and then press where I want. It's a little simpler. The dialog box for the labeling still pops up, and you're off and running. All right, let's look at recording groups. Let's say I want 1 through 9 at full, and I'm going to record that as group 1. So I can say record group 1. Notice on your command line it says selected, meaning that it will only store the channels that you have selected. Therefore, you don't have to worry the fact that we're in the queue and other channels are up there that they're going to get in the way, because with it only recorded selected, anything else will be ignored. So record group 1 is done. You see the little group 1 symbol next to all the channels. I'll hit release, and just to see if that works, I can say group 1 full. Let's talk a little bit about groups and subs. There actually is no difference when you're storing groups and subs. Subs is simply a group that has a slider attached to it. So we've already recorded group 1. If we wanted to record, say, submaster 6, for example. So what I'm going to do is release these channels. I'm going to grab 21 through 29, put them full, and I'm going to say record, and I'm just going to hit the bump button for sub 6. I could have also typed sub 6, but anyway, I'll release this. Now the button on sub 6 is lit up, and I can bring them up and down, and now we have a new color, yellow. Yellow is the color of levels from submasters. Now I talked about groups and subs essentially being the same. So I already have a group 1. If I want that to be on sub 1, I could go to my groups, subs, and special palettes label. I'll open this up a little bit, and I can see group 1 here, and I'll see there's a submaster column where there's nothing assigned. So I'll just set that to sub 1. We'll close this out, and now the bump button on my first submaster is lit, and I can bring that up and down. So now group 1 is the same as sub 1. There are lots of different ways to do effects, but we're just going to talk quickly about the effect library. So I'm going to grab 1 through 9, and if I want to do an intensity effect, I have the effect library. And if I open that up, you'll see there's lots of different effects. The background color will help you know what parameter attribute family parameter type it's affecting. So if I grab 1, I've got square wave wrap. Now we know it's running in effect because of the gray boxes with the white levels. You have encoder information to change the length, the offset, the scale, or the stagger. In the case of offset, that's essentially the low value or the beginning value, and scale is the high value or how far it's going to go on that when running that effect. So you can get that set correctly. All those parameters are assigned to your encoders. Once you get it the way you want it, to record that into a queue is as simple as just saying record. This brings you back to your queue list. If you just want to create a new queue, and I've got the effect text there in yellow to know they will include it, I can just hit record twice, and now I have effect number 1. So if I now grab another channel, bring it up, record another queue, notice the effect is still running because we haven't told it to do anything else. If we look in our sidebar, we've got our an effect number because it has created a show based effect for you. If we want to get rid of that effect for the next queue, I have a new tab here called queue effects. I can say stop, record the next queue, and I'm off and running. If we want to look at this quickly for color changing fixtures, I'm going to grab 101 through 110 by just clicking and dragging, which you can do with your mouse or with your finger. And I'll do effect library, and I'm just going to grab rainbow chase. So I've got again length, offset, scale, and stagger. Stagger is a a very useful parameter, especially with color. I've just set it to stagger 0, meaning that there's no difference between the information that's sent to all, this is the information sent to all channels at the same time, so there's no difference. As I slowly start increasing stagger, I'll see uh, additional delay that's added. I'm going to spin this all the way down to auto, so it'll auto select the delay. And again, I can just hit record, and now that effect is part of that cue. If I then go to cue effects and hit stop and record, then that will get rid of it in the next cue. This introductory video is just that, an introduction. Go to the website www.strandlighting.com for many more videos on Neo programming and operation.